movie we'll go through the design bench pit command in the surface mine module. For starters, it'll utilize this existing topography and a pit bottom elevation or grid. It'll also look at this polyline and cut down and in from there to simulate deepening this quarry pit. I have a grid file made of the existing ground and a grid file of the pit bottom. The command is under Surface, Design Bench Pit. The ground surface grid is called Surface Topo. The pit bottom, I'm going to go down to an elevation of 1400. This existing pit floor is 1500 elevation. I'm going down and in. I will turn on the road. It'll be 100 wide at a 10% slope, going counterclockwise from where I pick. The brake line resolution will be 25 horizontal, and I'll just do 100 vertical. And there's the layers. Hit OK. And I just have two intervals defined, 80 degrees, going 100 deep each time with no benches, just to continue this high wall down after a little catch bench. The preview of this slope should just be a consistent grade all the way like so. Hit OK. I'll select the pit polyline. And starting point for the road, I'll just turn on my intersection snap and we'll begin the road right at this corner. And there's the complete volume, just total dirt and rock volume. And take a look at that in 3D with the AutoCAD orbit. Tip it up on the side like so. Alright, let's trim out the old contours inside. And I'll freeze the new pit lines for starters. That leaves the original pit line, and I'll use the command edit, erase by close polyline. Select the polyline, we'll erase inside. And then restore the layers back, thaw them out. I'll put in a new inclusion boundary, and I'll use the triangulate and contour command, TRI, to write out a triangulation file. We'll just call it bench pit with ramp. And I will not do any contours. We're just going to write out the tin file inside that inclusion area. Select the inclusion boundary, no exclusion, and select the old and new contours and design together. Now we have the data problem log telling me I have a few brake line T intersections, but they're very small in difference in elevation. 0.8 is the largest, so I'll just go ahead and exit that and ignore that. Now we'll take a look at the tin file under the View Surface 3D Viewer. Grab the file, bench pit with ramp, tin. And we'll turn on color by elevation. And here's the original ramp up top, circles around, and then the new pit design begins here with the ramp coming down to the bottom of 1400 elevation there. I'll also now show how to make a 3D grid file from the resulting line work. That's under Surface, Make 3D Grid File. It's nice to have both a tin and a grid file of the final surface based on if you're doing tin work or grid work with the design bench pit and surface reserves. We'll call it Design Bench Pit 1. Use triangulation as a modeling method, and we'll make very small grid cells at 5 by 5. And we'll pick the lower left and upper right corners, and then crossing select all the 3D line work. So it wrote the grid, and we'll take a view at that 3D file, Surface 3D Viewer, Design Bench Pit 1 Grid. Just like we had the tin before, we now have a grid file. You can turn the hatching off to see. Now to do the 3D drive-by, we need to drape a polyline onto the grid surface. So I'll just sketch in a polyline from the top of the ramp, come down, turn left to the new ramp design, turn left again, down to the pit floor. Now we'll bring that polyline up to the grid surface with 3D data, 2D to 3D polyline by surface model. Grab the grid file, or it could be the tin as well. Pick the polyline to convert. Keep existing line no, set layer no. And now the polyline is draped onto that grid surface. Now we can do the 3D flyby with surface, 3D views. The command is surface 3D flyover. We'll use the grid and follow that new 3D polyline. Pick the polyline to follow and select the grid file. So now it loads it up into our 3D flyby window, and we have different views we can rotate around. This one happens to be a 3D grader. We could do a haul truck, which might be a little bit wide for that smaller ramp. We have scrapers, all sorts of new mining equipment. We could go with just a standard dozer D11. We'll go back to the grader and hit run. So now we're driving down that 3D polyline with the surface grid mesh in the background. There's different options for coloring, hatching, and if you have an aerial photo, you can drape that photo onto this 3D mesh so you're driving down through the photograph. So I'm coming down, and here's our new ramp design. As we approach the bottom of the original ramp, we should turn left again and go down this brand new ramp down to the new pit floor of 1400. And we'll stop there and rotate around and take a look. So that's a nice simulation on how the operator would approach the design from the original pit floor down to the new pit floor. This concludes the movie on Design Bench Pit with a ramp and drive-through simulation. Thank you.